Hello, I'm Jonathan Stark, and welcome to Inside the Brackets. Today we're diving into cross-platform war stories, real stories from real developers about the pitfalls, strategies, and victories they've had in building cross-platform apps. Joining us today are Kiran Prasad, Senior Director for Engineering for Mobile at LinkedIn, Brian LeRoux, Principal Product Manager at PhoneGap and Topcoat at Adobe, and Wroblewski, CEO and co-founder of Input Factory and the author of Mobile First. So Luke, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the most challenging cross-platform apps that you've worked on and what made them so difficult?
Sure. When most people think cross-platform, they think iOS, Android, web. And what we found actually to be really challenging was cross-platform on the web itself, but dealing with lots of different devices and use cases and the intersection points of those devices and use cases. We did a little collaboration with my company and Microsoft towards the middle of this year, where we created a means by which a web browser on the phone can control a web browser on the TV. In the TV, we also had sort of like a snap mode alongside content programming. So you can sort of picture us, there's a 10-foot away big TV experience that's split into two panels. One side has the web, the other side has media playing, and then there's a phone in your hand that's running a web browser, and you're controlling the experience on the TV with the experience in your hand.
How did you guys wire it all together?
It's basically sockets, web sockets on the back end, firing these things off. But the real challenge was really prioritization of this messaging queue. So let me give you one example. On the Xbox One, this sort of side panel on the TV, it's a web browser, and it reports a device width of 320 pixels. And that's how it renders content. The phone has the exact same thing. So if you're just going by device width, you would serve the same interface to this TV docked panel view as you would on the phone in the web browser. But putting what's on your phone on the TV 10 feet away is terrible. You can't read the fonts, the contrast is off, so on and so forth. So even though we were dealing with the same amount of pixels, we had to create a totally different set of input, set of output, in terms of how we designed it. So responsive web design did not cover the full gamut. And I wonder if we're going to run into more situations like that, where people start to be connected through lots of screens in their lives.
I wonder how this is going to impact sort of, we always talk about simplicity, we talk about less features, and as you have like this many devices, trying to ship a feature for your users, and if your users are using it across like TVs and glasses and phones and tablets and whatever, the number of features you can actually ship starts to go way down.
That's a good thing.
Is it a good or a bad thing?
I mean, I think it's a good thing in the sense that less is better for the user, because generally he's very confused when you have a lot of stuff. But I think it might be bad in the sense that right now we use testing. We effectively test a bunch of things to be able to try to guess what the user likes. And I think either we have to get much better at predicting, or we can't test as many things.
See, I think Luke touched on it a little bit. When he was talking about that, I was thinking how when we first got media queries, it was this really powerful idea where we can start sculpting the content to the device that it's on. But the width and height is like just the first we're just dabbling our toes right now. We don't really know what device we're running on, and I kind of want media queries for everything.
The scary part to me that I've been thinking about recently as we've gone through these experiences, are they a harbinger of things to come, and are we frankly putting a little too much reliance on what we know from media queries about the screen today? So you go and talk to companies like, oh, our strategy is responsive web design. Okay, well you just put a heck of a lot of weight on screen width, to be sort of blunt about it. Is that a fragile foundation to really be building towards the future on? And it's similar to what we used to do on the web, where we assumed everybody's on a 1024 monitor. And every time the web and sort of the diversity of devices out there proves us wrong, right? Like we make too many assumptions and we get caught with our pants down.
It's not just OS fragmentation, but it's also device fragmentation and then carrier fragmentation. We've run into bugs where like it completely works on the Nexus, and it won't work on the Samsung version of the same Nexus. Or it'll work on one Samsung S3, but it doesn't work on the Verizon Samsung S3. I think that's
AT&T rewrites headers, and you can't keep a socket connection open for the same amount of time
really
on different carriers.
Crazy that it's not. I think a lot of people, when they say fragmentation, they say, oh, there's a bunch of devices. But there's actually even more than that, and I think that's the part that I've always been surprised by, is like, I can't believe they're that different.
There's one more facet to this. It's operating system fragmentation for the authoring environments. Apple releases Mavericks, cool, breaks Xcode completely for us, right? And but I still have to build on older versions of Xcode, and so that's cool. Android, with each update, they like to move the platform and tools folder around. They just move it.
Yeah.
Then they'll leave a text file behind and say, hey, we moved this, by the way. So if you have any like tooling, like continuous integration or anything like that based on like where paths are, breaks completely. So there's operating system upgrades, and then there's also the upgrades of the SDKs, and then there's the operating system the SDK has to run on can be different. Windows is also really good for this. Windows Phone 7 can't run side by side with the SDK of Windows Phone 8.
Yeah.
Just can't. So that's cool.
Other interesting things down that path. So we use web views in parts of our app, right? And I was using sort of the standard responsive technique of width equals device width to render those out, which is great. So it basically renders at like 320 pixels because that's the iPhone thing. Well, it turns out they made a change with iOS 7 that the iPad now uses the device width in the embedded web view of the iPad web browser instead of using the one from the phone, even if you're running a phone app. And you're just like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So everything completely breaks, and we had to go in and actually change the way all the media queries in our web views work to fix it to a phone size, because now all of a sudden it started using a tablet size display inside of web views. So like there's stuff like that, and nobody tells you.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
Nobody tells you this is coming or they made this change. You just wake up one day and everything's totally broken.
China is a whole nother sort of interesting space because there's so many sub-variants of Android there.
Yeah.
And the App Store, actually, the Android App Store is not the primary App Store. So even from they have like 7 different primary App Stores, and it fragments in a completely other crazy way. Like the form factors, there are entire Android devices that don't have a back button.
Emerging markets fragmentation. That's
It's-
another thing that
it's a
everybody's
different-
kind of
How many
got the
layers
board
of
is-
fragmentation have we hit on just this one little show?
Right, yeah.
Anybody watching this, don't get too scared.
Yeah, I think the fragmentation is, it's really bad, as you're pointing out. It's like the surface that we're programming against is unbelievable. Like the browser wars were a joke compared to this.
Yeah.
The level of fragmentation that you are personally feeling the pain on depends on what you're building. Like if you needed to build a dialer app that ran on everything, you could definitely do it, right? But if you're trying to build another Facebook, maybe not so much.
Well, it kicks back to your point about, is this simplifying stuff? And I feel like in all my interactions with companies, so I go and talk to lots of big companies about this multi-device web thing, and I feel there's a real common theme, which is, me have website. How me put website on mobile? And I'm simplifying that drastically to sort of illustrate the point, but that's where people's headspace is. They've grown up in the desktop era, they've grown up in the laptop era, and that comes with particular constraints and opportunities, and they've framed their software in that context.
For LinkedIn, actually, as we've sort of looked at the website right now, like we measured how many unique web pages we have, actual unique pages. There's 3,700 of them. And then after we built the phone app, we decided to do the same
Pare
thing,
that
measurement.
down a little bit.
So we're down to 50.
Yeah.
And so
Oh, wow.
it's amazing to see that you can get it down to that. It's a lot of work to be able to sort of consolidate. But even at 50, it feels complicated to me. Like
That's
it's a lot.
crazy.
You have
right?
to keep pushing it. So what you just articulated is the whole reason I've been like banging my fist about this mobile first mentality. Like if you build the mobile version, it forces you to simplify and focus
Yeah.
things. And I wonder if future devices are actually going to do more.
So does that push
Linking.
us to lowest common denominator type stuff, or is that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think so, but that is the sort of
You know,
argument.
I actually, the way I've been thinking about it is using this metaphor of a Swiss Army knife. So I think a lot of times right now the websites and even mobile apps at this level are Swiss Army knives. They're trying to be everything for everyone. But you don't use your Swiss Army knife to sort of like cut your food in your kitchen. You end up with like, you have a butter knife, you have your steak knife.
Optimized.
Yeah, and so I think that's what all these devices are going to do. The Internet of Things sort of is it's slowly going to give you the ability to have specialized tools that do one thing really well, and you'll pick it up to do that one thing, and then you'll put it down and go use the next thing.
So do you see yourself, you guys at LinkedIn, moving towards having task-focused, like many apps?
Yeah, so
effectively?
we have, right now we already have 6 apps. And they're very task-focused. They're very specific to one purpose. We have this thing called the 5-second rule, which is if you launch the app and you can't tell what it does in the first 5 seconds, then that's it.
That's cool.
You're done.
That's a great rule.
So speaking of LinkedIn, you mentioned that you had an enormous number of pages on the website and you had to boil it down for mobile. LinkedIn also famously went from HTML5 to native applications. Can you talk a little bit about the sort of decision process there? What led you to that?
Because we saw so many people are going to be coming onto mobile, we wanted to pick a platform that everybody could develop against, so that when we build features, you wouldn't have to sort of re-implement it for iOS, re-implement it for Android, re-implement it for the mobile web, and then re-implement it for desktop web, and then tablet. I think we learned a couple things. One, which was sort of the biggest issue for us, was the tools to be able to sort of performance tune the platform to build the level of complex app that we have today. It's not as simple as a dialer. The level of complex app that we want to build today don't exist at the level I think we needed it to really get the leverage of reuse.
Still don't.
And you're not talking about the mobile web, you're talking about the wrapped apps, right?
Definitely for the wrapped apps, but even for the mobile web. I mean, for the mobile web, we use HTML5 because that's kind of the only thing that you can use.
Even Chrome DevTools is pretty, like, it's not, I shouldn't say primitive, but like when you're comparing it to what the kind of level of introspection you can get into the native stack with the
Xcode,
or even ADB, I mean, it's just a light years difference.
But I think that applies also not just to complex apps. I don't think this is an issue for complexity. I think the tools and the capabilities you get in the native world even allow you to make simple things that much better.
Yeah.
Right. So you can do stuff inside of a native application. You can create fake versions of things. You can do background processing. Look at Instagram, right? I mean, the act of uploading a photo through native is so fast, so seamless. Try doing that in a web browser.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to.
No, you could do that in a web browser. So when you take that picture in Instagram and then you go to the next screen while you're filling out the form to tell it where you were and all the tags and stuff, it's uploading in the background. You could do the exact same stuff with a web app. You just have to think that through. That's actually another point about all of this. The mobile network stack doesn't get better in native. It's the same. You're still dealing with the same bad network when you're going across all this stuff. And you have to rely on your UX to give perceived performance benefits.
I think the issue is not that you can't build the solutions, it's where you're spending your time. I feel like a lot of our time is spent getting that performant experience when I'm doing the web-based solution, while because you have all the tools and libraries and capabilities on the native side, more of my time is spent on making the design great.
What you described, I think, is sort of the fallacy of saving time through cross-platform development, right?
Yeah.
It all is going to take a lot of time. It's just a question of where you spend your time. If you're building native, what we found is we spend a ton of time tuning the user experience.
Yeah.
And like customizing the controls and tweaking this, and there's no
little delights.
But on the web, on the other hand, while we got CSS, we can kind of do this stuff really quickly and easily. We spend all our time with like cross-browser. What the heck is that one bug? How did that?
Why is that not showing up?
A whole day is just burned on trying to find some esoteric thing in one browser that, frankly, if you're building for a single platform, you never deal with it.
Yeah, but you're just sidestepping the problem there, because if you were just building a web app for iOS, it'd be a lot easier, don't you think?
Which is also fine, right? Like, you can pick and choose your battles. That's part of that cross-platform fallacy. People think when you're building for the web, you automatically inherit all these platforms, but you don't. You have to build for each one. The good news is, as you're building for each one, it's not going to be a complete rewrite.
I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And if you look, like fast forward 3 years, mobile is eating the planet. We got about 7 billion people on the planet. We're going to have around 4 billion mobile users, 3.5 billion smartphone users, and 1.5 maybe PC users. Yet when we build for the web right now, it's still like support all devices, work on the desktop, whereas native mobile apps, they're like, no, we're just going to give you the tools to make something amazing on mobile.
Bar is higher.
It's way higher, and they're focused.
The other thing is also, it could be just an org thing. I've started to see that, like, when companies start mobile groups, they start the native mobile app group, and then the website is still like run by the desktop web group, right? And so you end up with sort of this sort of real separation of skill set. You have people who are 100% focused on only one thing. They recognize what is and isn't possible, and that's what they're aimed after. And they have to support so much. I mean, it's hard.
It's a whole new world, and it's everybody's attitude is being adjusted. So the iPhone's been around for 5-6 years now.
2007. Yeah.
2007, yeah. So almost 6 years. So when that landed, everyone's like, "Oh, here we go. It's mobile. It's a thing."
Yeah.
And and yet I go to so many websites and they are horrible. Why would that be, right? Like, we've had 5-6 years now to like catch it up, and it's just sort of entrenched thinking.
When I started at LinkedIn, we have an international group and we have a mobile group, and both of them were formed because effectively, like, about 4 to 5% of our traffic was from international, and 4 to 5% of our traffic was from mobile. And so we're investing, and now we're close to, 40% of traffic is mobile.
40% of your traffic is mobile now. Awesome.
And about 40%
Low, man.
of traffic is
kick that up.
international. We're going to. So we're probably going to hit the 50% number next year, middle of next year, no doubt.
Wow.
And same thing is happening on the international side. So I think the model that seems to be working is like you have to start with this small focus group. It gets to some point, and then it has to like explode back into the organization. Because it makes no sense to say that some small group owns 50, 60, 70, 80%, then what's the rest of the organization doing?
That's all the time we have today for part 1 of our cross-platform war stories episode. If you liked what you heard, please join us next time for part 2 to hear more from Kieran, Brian, and Luke on their real-life experiences building cross-platform apps. See you next time.